So I say all that to remind you guys that these are some of the most commonly used. This hits every repair estimate, and it's such a significant change. It's not all about the new line items that are adopted every month. It's what changes are made to the most commonly used line item. And if you've ever been told by an adjuster that masking is included in the painting line item, then getting underneath the hood of this change is probably what you came here for.
Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Price List Update Summary video series brought to you by Actionable Insights. You've got Harrison here and you've got Whatley there. And we bring you every month all of the new line items that were added to the Xactimate price list. Plus, and really important for this month, February 2022, we're also going to highlight all the changes and modifications to existing line items. And Whatley, there were a lot of changes to existing line items this month. There are 20 new line items to cover that were added to the exact price list and a number of modifications. Before we jump into the big changes, I want to give a shout out to the Verisk Elevate conference happening next week as of when this video will come out. February 15th and 16th in Salt Lake City. You can join in person. Last minute travel plans are always welcome. Or you can join virtually for free. So check out the Verisk Elevate conference website online so that you can see Whatley and Harrison and myself, Whatley and myself speak at the Elevate conference on Wednesday, the 16th. So I am very much looking forward to that. Whatley, what are we talking about? Yeah.
Geospatial data and how that's being leveraged primarily in a claims environment.
Yeah, the exponential estimating with geospatial technology, something that we know well, that we've talked about for years, but I'm excited to get the chance to put it out there on stage for everybody that's attending in person and virtually.
Yeah, let's do something. I'm going to go off cuff a little bit, but I think we should keep an excited count, like somewhere down in like the bottom right corner. Maybe the top right corner. We'll let the production team figure it out. But so far, we got one
excited. Seth is excited once so far this episode.
He's pretty excited usually. So
right.
We're this excited. We're excited so far. Let's see how excited you get today.
Maybe a super cut of how excited Seth was in 2022 is warranted in the future.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Video editing team, look out for that. All right. The other thing that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, it's February. As many of you know, we are also Matterport certified trainers, and we put out the Actionable Insights Matterport Certification course. If you're looking into geospatial technology and you're looking at Matterport and you're wondering, how do I use this technology? How do I document and settle claims with it? How do I work with the digital sketch assets like schematic floor plans and TruePlan?
Or you're looking around and all of your competitors are doing it and you're like, oh, wait a minute.
We have the online... Yeah, we have the online training and certification course that you'd be looking for to train up your staff. So AIMC, the Actionable Insights Matterport Certification 2022 course is now available. And we also have the continuing education course. So if you took AIMC in either 2020 or 2021, we've got some update courses for you to maintain your certification. All of those are now available for the year of 2022. So if you're looking for some Matterport and trying to figure out how do I train up my staff and how do I figure this stuff out, we've got the course that'll help you get you where you're trying to go. All right, that's enough of the previews. Let's jump into the meat and potatoes of the February 2022 changes to the Xactimate price list. As you can see here, I have X1 open, and I am using the new February 22 price list, and we have 20 new line items to look at this month. The first 19 are all in the same category code, MTL. And we have RFGET, RFGET plus. I'm not going to read every selector code, but I just had to make you scared that I was. There are 19 new line items from the that were roofing related line items added to the MTL category code. Now, Whatley, I'm going to break our normal trend just to show people that in the modification sections, there were already many of these line items in the RFG category code related to metal roofing. So what we're seeing here is essentially a duplication of existing line items into another category code from the RFG category into the MTL. Now, we've talked over the last couple episodes, we've seen this change more and more. And we've talked about the importance of the Xactimate software, making sure that people can use the line items as they're intended in the context of program work, where they want you to keep all the line items in the WTR category code or all the line items in the DRY category code. But there are some differences in the changes here. One of the main ones here is that for these MTL category roofing line items, the labor trade code is not roofing, it is steel, which makes sense. It's in the MTL category, and they're using a steel worker. You can even see in the additional item information of these MTL roofing line items that it says the labor type used in this item is a steel worker. What are your thoughts here on this duplication and introduction of the metal roofing line items into the MTL category code?
I've always been puzzled by the MTL category code because of the labor overhead there that's just above your cursor. See how that's at 88 cents. So what is that really capturing? Your labor overhead. Primarily that's your work comp. And if you were to look at a RFG line item for a roofer, that's going to be around $4.80, $5.20, working off the top of my head. So $4.22, right? So what is that? That's 5x the cost for work comp. Seems about right. I mean, notice the worker's wage isn't that significant of difference. Labor burden isn't that significant in terms of difference. The yields are exactly the same, which is wobbly, but let's just assume that that's fine. The difference is work comp. So can we engage metal workers to install roofs? Harrison, when you're installing a roof, what's one of the primary functions, like maybe the only function as a roofer? You're thinking about moisture protection. How do I establish a building envelope that's not going to leak when rain hits, right?
Roof stop water and other stuff, yes.
I'm not sure that a steel worker, a metal worker is like thinking about it in the exact same context. So I've never understood the MTL exactly. Maybe somebody can explain it to me, but it's like, were we installing these roofs not at height? Are there work comp concessions not warranted? Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe it's like other structures for barns or something. I don't know.
Maybe.
So, anyhow, you got a bunch of new line items, guys, and the yields are the same, but the labor overhead is not exactly favorable. So this is a carrier-centric move, as I see it, to like add all these new line items. Just the way it is. So if you're in program work and you're getting crammed down in MTL for your roofing, good luck. But otherwise, if you're a contractor and it's all the same, you're probably going to stick with the traditional RFG line items that capture the outsized cost associated with work comp.
Well said. There are some other opportunities we're going to have in this recording to highlight some of the differences between these line items. So I want to leave these MTL category code line items here, as there are 19 new line items that existed previously in the RFG category that are now in the MTL category, and we'll further discuss some of the yield similarities, aka the same, as well as the cost differences or changes. Lastly, Whatley, the 20th line item here, the only other new line item in February 2022, was the interior double door full louvered pre-hung unit line item. We saw a preview of this in last month's what to expect for the next month at the end of the January 2022. So here it is, as promised, as delivered. Now, normally we spend a lot more time on all the new line items, but there's 19 and they're all pretty similar. And one of the things that I really want to highlight today is not the 19 new line items, but you'll see here I have the e-service center up. This is where you can find the wall of text that Verisk puts out there about the changes. There are an incredible amount of changes to existing line items this month, an unprecedented amount, really, from what we normally see of how many line items are touched, adjusted, or updated. So let's take a look. I've organized these in our typical way: yield and supporting event changes, then kind of additional item information changes, as well as some miscellaneous changes at the end. I have January 2022 on the left. I have, let's see here, February 2022 on the right. So nice big bolded headers, as you know, we like our formatting. January left, February right. And we'll take a look at the differences between these 2 months to the existing line items. You will note, by the way, I am going to constantly bring over the sheet because there's a lot of changes and I want you guys to see exactly what I see when we're talking about these. So the first change in the DOR category, if you don't know or you haven't seen this before, the asterisk is essentially a wild card, meaning everything after or anything that could be there and after applies to that particular selector code. Is there a better way to say that?
No.
Okay, so it's DOR star, so essentially all selector codes in the DOR category. What did they do this month? They reviewed the shim, fastener, and or casing material component yields. So normally, Whatley, we talk about labor components, but they're looking specifically at material components for interior and exterior door items and made minor adjustments to the replace activity assemblies as warranted. So first off, you should know we looked at door AV and there were no significant changes to highlight. So Whatley, in preparation for this recording, we went for a French door exterior pre-hung unit to try to better look at the changes here. Now, first note, it went from $851.22 to $851.43. So it's approximately a 21-cent change in an $850 line item. Not really a significant impact, but this is what we do, Whatley. This is what we do on this call. We really want to look at the details to figure out what are they looking at and what are they seeing. Yeah. And if I go to these material components for the finished nails, and I hit edit, I'm going to have the opportunity here to see kind of the changes in the direct yield. So in finished nails, we had an increase in yield, right? 7 to 9, which essentially the inverse, you're already doing it. The inverse relationship between yield and price. See how far back we go? When yield goes up, price goes down. When yield goes down, price goes up, right? That's the inverse relationship here. So yield went up and the price of that component within the line item went down. Here under the wood screws, yield went down from 10 to 8.3, direct yield. So the price went up a little bit. This is why I say all in all, these changes resulted in a 21-cent change, which isn't the biggest impact in the world. But Whatley, what does this show you that Xact is looking for?
They're doing hardcore research. Look at the numbers. So direct yield was 10.000. What do you bet when somebody made that calculation, they were just throwing something against the wall? And it was so granular, like it wasn't affecting the price that much. And so later they went out and deployed field teams to like audit contractors to installing doors, and then they develop some quantitative metrics around it, and then you can see the direct yield is 8.33, and that didn't show up for no reason. So anyhow, on balance, it's not carrier centric or contractor centric because they kind of balanced out the two of them. You're going to use presumably less finishing nails but more drywall screws. Yes So here we are.
All right, next one. We have the bottom plate and drilled bottom plate. Please note that these are in the removal activity code. So these changes are specific to the removal category on these bottom plates. And what we saw was a change in supporting events. This is a labor-only line item, no material components. Historically, and Whatley, we've seen this for years, the removal activities of line items typically default to the DMO category code, labor trade code, supporting events code, because it's a removal, it's demo. But what we've seen here is that they've updated the supporting events from a DMO LAB, so demolition laborer, into the FRM laborer. Overall, that's a 3 to 4% change in supporting events. So it went from a 39% inefficiency in a demo environment to a 43.75% inefficiency in a carpenter general framer environment. I think this is a warranted change that actually reflects the person doing the work and the environment within which they're doing their trade. What are your thoughts on this transition?
Yeah, I think that the supporting events should typically follow the trade code. And this is just an expression of that very notion.
Love it. All right. Bottom plate, drill bottom plate. Okay. Lastly here, these are MTL line items. So more metal line items. These were existing. And the change to these particular ones, you'll see modified supporting event for labor component in the plus. So if we go here and info to info, labor component, it went from the RFG labor supporting events in the MTL line item into the MTL supporting events in the MTL line item. The actual change in inefficiency here, 29% to 31%, is not a big one. But kind of like what you were just saying, we want the supporting events to reflect the labor trade code and the person doing the work. That same change has been
applied here.
Applied here, yes. All right. Moving and grooving. Okay, we've had a lot of conversations on Exact Ninjas in the last week and a half as people started to see these updates and come out. So this is an important one for our ninjas out there to kind of look at what these changes are here. First off, you'll see as I pull up the e-service center in the drywall line items, right? So dry 1 star, meaning all variations of dry category, 1/2 minus, right? All of these variations, wildcard. Modified included field of the removal definition to clarify that removing corner bead would be included. And you're going to see this down here in the same WTR category codes. Modified the removal to clarify that removing corner bead would be included. What does that actually look like? Let's take a look at removing dry 1/2 here. And when we look at the additional item information, they've added the words corner bead in here. So I don't know how Whatley people were invoicing for the removal of corner bead separately from removal of drywall line items. In fact, there is no individual corner bead line item, so maybe labor hours, etc. But essentially,
like such a goofy arms race. Like, what actually happened here is some contractors were invoicing for corner bead removal as a
on top of removing drywall line items like these. Yes.
Eye roll. And so then some carrier executive reached out to Verisk, and then they're like, hey, can we clarify this? Or probably ask the question, is it intended to include corner bead? And the answer is yes. And so then they asked for this addition to the additional item information. You all are goofballs for invoicing for removal of corner bead as a separate line item. But okay, yeah, you can't do that anymore. So that's pretty clear. So this was a carrier-centric adjustment, however minute.
Yes, and let me actually add on to what you just said there. Sometimes, Whatley, a line item includes something and it didn't say that it included it. And people may know that, like temporary toilet, for example, was one that we looked at years ago, where we woke up one day and the additional item information said it included the delivery and pickup when previously it had not. Mm-hmm. The price did not change. So this is important to recognize that Xact's additional item information, they do their best to put out what's included or excluded. And as the line item gets used, occasionally friction will come up in a claim. And it would be important for those using that line item to clarify its intent, whether it's with Xact themselves or through these video series to find out what new line items came out. But it's most important that we recognize this price didn't change because it always included the removal of corner bead. It just didn't literally state removal of corner bead. Contractors noted that and found ways to invoice for it separately, but it wasn't the intention of removal of dry line items to have to invoice for removal of corner beads separately. So this is not like, hey, why didn't the price didn't change and they're including stuff? It always included it. And this is just a good clarification of the intent of the line item. We want people to fight less. Wildly, when they settle claims, we want this industry to be good for people. So hopefully this helps reduce the friction and at least get everybody on the same page. All right. Moving and grooving. I'm not going to call out all the removal drywall line items here, but you can see both WTR category line items for removal and DRY minus have the change.
Even HMR?
Yes, even the HMR removal. All right, next up, what do we got?
Painting. So a lot of the most commonly used line items in Xactimate. What's the most commonly used line item in Xactimate? You know, Harrison?
Oh, off the top of my head? Oh, gosh. Probably PNTP2 or alike, or some kind of roofing line item.
So in the continental United States, the last time I had access to this information, it was PNTP, and closely followed by PNTP2. So one coat of paint slightly outranks it, U.S., and here in the U.S. In Canada, it's the inverse. So 2 coats of paint is more common in Canada. Regardless, what that data tells you is if any adjuster tells you as a contractor that they've never seen anybody bill for 2 coats of paint, that's nonsense. And in the inverse, if a adjuster is trying to get you to move to 1 coat of paint, they're not absolutely out of their mind, and that it's a fairly common line item for you guys to debate in the comments later. But yeah, so I say all that to remind you guys that these are some of the most commonly used. This hits every repair estimate, and it's such a significant change. It's not all about the new line items that are adopted every month. It's what changes are made to the most commonly used line item. And if you've ever been told by an adjuster that masking is included in the painting line item, then getting underneath the hood of this change is probably what you came here for.
Let's dive in. I'm going to pull up the eService Center link here because I want to point out, here's the actual text in the change. Modified the note field of the replaced definition of painting line items to reference that a reasonable amount of prep work is included. And why this came up is if I go to January, last month, and I take a look at this line item, you'll see that it says, and here, you know what? I'll do it this way so we can actually look at the picture to picture. An average amount of this kind of prep work is included. This is what the painting line items have said for years, that what is included is an average amount of prep work. What kind of prep work? It says removing, switching out like cover plates, dropping simple light fixtures, and moving items away from the wall. So an average amount of kind of prep work. Now, Whatley, I remember joining you in 2017, 2016, and I remember starting to look at these kinds of things and asking the questions about what is an average amount of prep work? Well, how would you answer that question? Contractor adjuster looks at this pre-February 2022. How do you answer an average amount of prep work?
Well, I think one of the reasons they made this adjustment is defining what is average is really difficult. And especially when you weigh that with the naming conventions for line items between economy and standard and average and high and deluxe and premium and custom. Where does average fall, and is that even relative? And I don't think it is relative, but I think a lot of novice users could conflate the two. And so where could we arrive? What kind of language could we use that would be more clear? And when you think of legalese and you think of precedents that are established in law, it's not around the word average. It's around the word reasonable. If you want something to be underdefined and leave it up to debate for 2 or 3 parties at a later point in time, you would use the terminology reasonable. What's heartbreaking about this is I think this is such a good faith effort by the pricing department to reduce claims friction. And what do you and I have on Xactimate Ninjas is folks going, that's it. Zach sold us out. They're now reasonable amount of prep works, including in every painting line item. Until, somebody steps up and says, I think it was Dave Dickerson's like, well, no, they just replaced the word average with reasonable. This isn't a significant change in a way, but I think it would express itself by reducing some claims friction. And it does affect line items that are used on a daily basis, thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands of times a day. So, I think it's somewhat impactful. I think some conversation it's going to create some conversation between adjusters and contractors about what reasonable means, but I'd certainly rather have a conversation around reasonable than average.
Average. Yeah, there was no numerical way to say what average was, which the word average generally means numerical, the median. But reasonable is a good way to approach it. And Whatley, this is actually kind of builds on a change that we saw not too long ago. If you'll note here, they've added kind of all this language in the past, I think 6 months to a year. And I really want to talk about it, just this whole statement. It now says what is included in the painting line items. A reasonable amount of this kind of prep work is included in situations where detaching, resetting fixtures is warranted because of size, situation, and or a trade license contractor being needed. This assumption would not normally be included and may need to be accounted for separately. So not only is Xact saying there's a reasonable amount of taking off outlet cover plates, dropping simple light fixtures, moving contents of walls, but let's really be clear here that if it's size, situation, complexity, then that would not be considered as a part of the reasonable work, right? So they're trying to set the stage for here's what's reasonable, an average amount. Here's where it could start to be not reasonable and where you need to have the conversation about should that be invoiced for under a separate line item or not.
You know what's omitted here, but I think it guides claims professionals and contractors is how high end is this property? When they're saying a reasonable amount of prep work, if you've got an $8 light fixture in a closet in an apartment building that can be hung from the wire nuts and just suspend because it's only £1 or £2 and that can be done safely. And if it breaks, it costs you $11 at Home Depot to replace. Then, that's probably under the auspice of reasonable amount of prep work. But if you start working in higher end properties where the test for that paint work becomes higher, we don't have door hinges that have been painted 17 times and we have light fixtures that are heavier and more ornate and more expensive, and we potentially need a licensed contractor to drop a chandelier and so on. That weighs in here, and I think if I put my claims adjuster hat on, if I'm looking at these line items and then you're adding on additional add-on for prep work and so on, but it's in a higher end property. That makes it a lot more palatable for me than if it's a 1955 apartment building that hasn't been updated in half of a century.
I think that's well said, right? The type of the house, the quality of the building materials should all fit into what is reasonable or not working in that particular environment, right? Which is why I think the word situation is included for that particular reason.
Fair.
Like but it's good to add the context to one word like situation. And as always, also importantly, the manipulation of larger or excessive amount of contents items may warrant additional separate items. So generally, as you have already mentioned, these painting line items, PNTP, PNTP2, are some of the most commonly used line items across the industry every day. This is not the biggest change in the world, but it's an important one to understand the difference between the word average and reasonable, what is included in an item and what is not. The other thing I quickly wanted to point out here, which Ben Justison has been reminding people in the comments in Xactimate Ninjas, is that you can always dive into the components to see what is there and what is not. There is no kind of, masking, etc., that is included in this line item here. So if you ever have a conflict as to what is included or not based on the words in the additional item information, you can always look at the material components to see what actually is in the line item or is not in the line item.
So what would prep work include if it wasn't masking?
Well, I'm going to go by the definition in the additional item information, which says removing switch and outlet cover plates, dropping simple light fixtures, and moving items away from the wall.
Yeah. And I suppose the painter's putty and the sandpaper and latex paint. Well, of course, latex paint would be in there. I was thinking that was acrylic caulk like you'd see on painting a baseboard line item. Interesting. So yeah, just a little bit of painter's putty, a little bit of sandpaper. It does beg the question of like how much labor is running around with the sandpaper. Like there's nothing more time consuming, arduous, painful as a painter than sanding with sandpaper.
The labor component is the most expensive here. Yeah. So that makes sense the way that is built. All right. So big changes to the painting from the word average to reasonable. And hopefully that sets up our contractors and adjusters to have better conversations about what's reasonable. Why do we write the Insight Cheat database, a database of 3,700 plus Xactimate invoicing templates, so that we could help define when you're invoicing with Xactimate in this industry, here's what would be reasonable and customary. We don't say this is your scope. It's not copy paste. It's, hey, let's have a foundation as to what's reasonable and customary, and then build off from there, negotiating, talking, educating, etc.
You got it.
All right. Moving on. These were the existing metal roofing line items in the RFG category code. If I bring back the e-service center here, you'll see added text to clarify the labor type as a roofer. What does that actually look like? As I open up the eye for information, you'll see here now I got to select the new line items here. Now in the notes section, it was previously empty. They're just explaining this is a roofer. It's an RFG category code. There you go. Okay. Gutter guard screens, high grade and premium grade. This is in the soffit SFG category code. And the change here is that they've added text to clarify different factors could affect pricing. While this is language we've seen, here, I'll open up the photo here, over the years be added to more and more line items. This is Xact's way of saying, hey, situationally, things come up. Material, situation, the cost may be different in your area. What you'll see here, where did this come out? It used to end after the word downspouts, and it now says factors such as specific product, accessibility, installation and contractor, et cetera, may have a large effect on pricing. Estimators should review the cost of their specific job and make adjustments as necessary. So
yeah, the materials around gutters is evolving. There's a bunch of folks trying to create situations where, you don't have to pay somebody to come out and clean your gutters every year. So if you've ever been on Instagram, you're probably getting all kinds of advertisements for how to clean your gutters in new ways. Like some of the new gutters, they kind of flip over like a dump truck.
Yeah.
And they dump out. And then there's all kinds of gutter guards that range in complexity and cost.
So it's funny you say that, because this really builds on your point from the painting around situational context. What is the house? What is the quality of the materials? Because note, this is for high grade and premium grade. This is Xact saying, hey, when you get to high grade and premium grade for these gutter guard screens, things become more complex. Here's what we believe to be the average price to do those activities in that area. But ultimately, we understand that the cost may be varied based on the situation at hand, and we're encouraging you to review and update it as necessary.
Yep.
All right. Lastly, 3 changes here, kind of like some random changes in the additional item information. The light strip line item, LIT strip I, changed from, or just the description changed from incandescent or LED. So we have one line item to invoice for that particular activity. In the fiber cement lap siding, the SDG category code, they added text to the replace to assume that corner and trim boards would not be included. So this is an important one. If you are using this line item, SDG FCLP, around fiber cement lap siding, Xact has now in the excludes section, this particular corner excludes corner and trim board C, SDG 1X asterisk FC. And in our research, Whatley, we pulled up and we're like, hey, what line items exist for FDG 1X, right? If I type in that, you'll see, and
FC4,
6 and 8.
FC, and 8 FC.
So those are the 3 line items for fiber cement trim board that should be used alongside of the SDG FC.
It may be warranted.
I was going to get there. Should be used if warranted. I got you. So good to see that. Hey, that's a clarification on the other way, right? Hey, just to clarify, not included. And if you do need those line items, here's where example of what line items you'll be using. This boom lift line item, EQUBLIFT, has just been clarified that it references either a boom lift or a spider lift for the purposes of invoicing for that. There. Okay. Whatley, I love to see changes like this. It to me speaks that like people are watching, both you guys watching this video now, contractors and adjusters, but guess what? The pricing department watches these videos as well. And you guys have seen over the last two monthly calls in December 2021 and January 2022, let's talk about these new power distribution boxes. We saw new line items for greater than 100 amps power distribution boxes. And it says in the description, greater than 100 amps. But the existing line items here on the left side from January 2022, they're complementary below 100 amps didn't say it. And while the one thing we want people when they're using the Xact software is when you're searching for a line item, it's quite clear what is it or what it's not from the beginning. So you don't have to bring up multiple line items to compare them. The more efficient we get, the better we get at this whole claims processing, settling thing that we do in this industry. So it is great to see a change here that just clarifies the 4 existing line items around power distribution box per day, per week, TMP category code, and the WTR category code have been updated to be below 100 amps in the description so that when you're looking for it, you know, if I got 120, use above. If I've got 80, use below. Yes.
Can you pull up POW D plus? Is that what it is? The 100 amp?
It's greater than sign.
It's greater than?
Yes. POW D greater than sign.
Greater than. Nice. Yeah. So that's the 100 amp plus. So you can see it's one or the other. And now
below 100, 100 plus.
It is very clear.
Excellent. Lastly, this WTR DRY category code here. So remember why we always like telling the story, WTR dry, right? It's one of the, in our opinion, one of the first line items ever created when Xactimate was getting together. It's like, hey, we need a line item for drying stuff with an air mover. Okay, let's try WTR dry, right? One of the first ever line items created. So it's one of my favorites. You'll see here, there's been a change in the additional item information, and specifically it's referencing the quality of the air mover and how much CFM is there. The landmark or the metric between what was a normal air mover and what was a mini air mover used to be 950 CFM. So if you had greater than 950, you had a normal air mover. And if you had less than 950, you had a mini air mover. What we are now seeing in February 2022 is that metric has changed from 950 CFM to 850 CFM. So give me your thoughts on kind of what this signifies when it comes to air movers and how people are using air movers.
So both for a standard size air mover and the mini air mover, this was a tweak that expressed itself as a contractor-centric tweak, and that the test for CFM is smaller for a standard or lower for a standard size air mover. One, I think what the pricing department is really trying to do is just track what the manufacturers are doing. And there's been a big push from the Dry Eases and the Phoenixes of the world to focus less on the CFMs and worry concern more with efficiency, like amp draw. Because one of the most frustrating, time-consuming things when you're deploying dry out equipment, and I don't see it talked about, and I don't see it like invoiced for, but I remember just going through hell when I'm slinging dehues and air movers, was blowing breakers. And you'd get everything set up, and you'd think it'd be in good order, and then all of a sudden that compressor would come on for that LGR dehu, and then pop, and then, okay, let's go and do this all over again. Let's figure out what's on what circuit, what's not. That's a nightmare in a residential scenario. It's dark, can't see. It's 11:30 at night. My wife is going to file for divorce if I don't get home soon, and now I'm dealing with this nightmare of chasing breakers around. Some of you guys watching this can relate. I think Phoenix and Dry's are making that adjustment. Like, they're focused on the efficiency of these machines, and CFMs is kind of taking a back seat.
I want to build on that, because not only do we have the text change around that, but check this out. We have a new note in the additional item information specific to, due to ever improving technology and the efficient equipment, and as the actual type of equipment used varies, CFM may not always be the best indicator. The price for this line item is therefore based on the reported cost for the most predominantly used mini drying fans in this area for this mini particular line item. So you've got some clarification there, them trying to, move with the times and the technology to help people figure out what line items they should be using to invoice appropriately. Okay, that's everything I got. That's all the new line items. That's all the changes to existing line items. I think, Whatley, there were significant changes this month to existing line items that people have been using throughout their careers. And this is why the Price List Update Summary video series can be so important to stay on top of every month, because it's not just all the new line items, but it's what happened to the existing line items that I've used for years. But if you don't know what changed about them, then you don't know the actual line item anymore. And we want to set you guys up for success when you're using the most commonly used line items in restoration, like PNTP and PNTP2. Now, before we go, we'd like to look at what is coming up in the future. I'm going to bring back this e-service center.
This is where he gets excited, guys. It's coming.
I don't think I said.
I know. Because
I only said it once in the beginning.
I put you on a watch.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. I'm really proud of myself. Okay. What's upcoming?
Just be excited. We know you want to be excited.
We've had changes around payroll tax rates, labor burden, remapping postal codes, etc. This is where I really want to know. What are the future changes and additions to what do we got coming up in March, in April, etc.? We've got items for a full home surge protector on the way, dry fogging for mold, possible items or add-on items for installing fencing in cold weather or difficult areas. That's an interesting one. I've never seen that kind of language before. Possible / add-on line items coming in something that there's obviously associated costs if with difficult fencing or cold areas.
You ever tried to dig a hole when it's frozen outside?
Can't say that I have, but I could see how that's very difficult.
Me either, but I've heard our students complain about it.
100%. And lastly, items for drywall returns for commercial windows. So we continue to see more commercial line items come out to accommodate commercial work when using Xactimate.
Yeah, that'll be a good addition, because the walls on a commercial tilt up are like 8-10 inches, and so you've got an exterior window, and then there's like a bullnose return into that window, or traditional corner bead, but that's like another 6 inches. And I've seen invoices from our drywallers; they charge for that separately based on each building envelope opening. So it makes sense that that's going to be an addition in commercial. I like that.
I like that too.
Sense. And this dry fogging for mold, man, I could use that line item 10 years ago. That's quite useful. So that's interesting to see. I know you guys are going to shame me, but I mean, we were on board with Goldmore 2000 pretty early, and it wasn't really still hasn't been a practical way to invoice for fogging and encapsulation of spores. So anyhow, that's a cool addition. I mean, Goldmore's wobbly, that's not lost on me, but certainly there's other products out there, and even better products now today, where this line item will seek to accommodate. So that one is pretty exciting, Derek.
Oh, I was just going to say, that sounds like an exciting change coming up. I'm excited to have gone through this entire priceless update summary. Thank you for following us. Every single follow and like is extremely exciting for me. I see all of it. So please like us, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever you are finding us. By the way, reminder, the best place to watch is always on getinsights.org, where you can click any of these line items hyperlinked below the video, and you can jump to us talking right about it. Now, Whatley, I am excited for next week. It is going to be an exciting time at the Elevate conference where we get to get on stage. I think that's when I'm most excited, when I'm on stage at all times. And it's always nice to share the stage with you. And we even have one of our contractor friends, John Staple, coming out from Menald/Blue Sky, who will be there on stage with us to talk about the impact that geospatial technology like Matterport has had on their estimating process, and most importantly, the bottom line. So without further ado, thank you for tuning in for another edition of the Price List Update Summary video series, and we will see you next month.
Keep building.